This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
Ladies and gentlemen, God bless you. Welcome to another edition of Make It Plain. And this is Thursday. You know what that means. It's time for DailyKos with the founder of DailyKos, the largest online progressive community, the founder of Civiqs with a Q, and also the host of The Brief, the weekly podcast that is growing with popularity every day. It is the most popular podcast in the universe.
I wish.
Markos Moulitsas joins us now. Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm doing great. You look like you're presiding from the Supreme Court.
Dude, I even have on the black. I do.
That's some fancy digs. Where are you at?
I am, for those of you viewing, I am in the Mike Mansfield room of the United States Senate. I'm literally just about 100 feet from the entrance to the Senate floor. But don't worry, I'm not going to do like the insurrectionists did. We had a nonviolent demonstration on the Senate steps yesterday, many arrests. I have been here all day as a guest in the gallery, along with other clergy, to watch the floor debate around voting rights. And then so you'll hear this Thursday. Today is Wednesday, as we talk about this. And by the time you hear this, the vote will probably have been taken. Prospects don't look good. Just had and you'll hear also in this broadcast, folks, a press conference that the Congressional Black Caucus had briefly, and I got a chance to ask a question or two. But Markos, a lot of great speeches.
Like Tim Scott?
No. Well, I haven't heard his yet, but I'm saying from Democrat.
Okay.
Democrats have been strong. A lot of great words, but they're paralyzed. Had an off-the-record conversation with Ed Markey just out here in the hallway. And, he's just scratching his head, Manchin and Sinema. It's a mess. And it's with this close. And the two of them just won't budge. So, folks, I don't hold a lot of hope that by the time you hear this Thursday morning that we're going to have these bills passed, because the two of them won't move from the filibuster position that they have. But it is an historic day because we're hearing defenses of democracy and voting rights that are fundamental to this American experiment, as they call it. And this coming in the very week of Dr. King's birthday. I'm sure you saw Markos. She tweeted out a remembrance of Dr. King.
And is talking about Kirsten Sinema?
Sinema. I'm sorry, Sinema. And in the words of Raphael Warnock, you can't remember him on the one hand and dismember his legacy on the other hand.
Yep.
You can't do that. And so I'm in this Mansfield room. For those of you who can see, George Washington's portrait is behind me. And I sat in front of this portrait purposely because our experience as African Americans goes back that far. George Washington held enslaved people. And so today, part of getting out from up under America's original sin of slavery is fighting for our democratic rights to vote. We weren't real citizens. Markos, as you and I have said, this Senate is constructed around the principle of slavery. You have states that have disproportionate representation to other states. Like you live in California. Y'all only got 2 senators.
Yep.
But other states have equal Senate representation that you have, because the thing was, wait a minute, we're going to count 3/5 of the number of slaves we have so we can have an equal. So, that is a tyranny of the minority. Then you have the physical minority with the filibuster using that. And then you have another minority of 2 Democrats. So it's like a triple minority. You didn't even have a triple minority in South Africa. There was one party. It was just white folks oppressing black people, minority party. We took it out. But here it's layered. You've got the construction of both houses of Congress itself. Then you've got the 2-party system where one party, in this case, Republican, can do what it does. And then on top of that, within the Democratic Party, 2 other people who are doing that. So the minority, last I'll say, I think Chris Van Hollen said it best yesterday. Because of the way it was set up, the minority is already represented. And he talked about how some states have a fourth of the population of other states. So
Fourth, you're talking North Dakota with 600,000 people, which is less than the population of San Francisco. Or, in fact, I think I saw a statistic that said that there's like 18 cities with more population than that of Wyoming.
Yeah. So the minority is represented because they still get the same number of people you and I get.
Yeah, they get,
you and I in the two biggest states, California and New York, but they don't have. They're not locked out. So you know, it's that's why we're here, man. And it's I don't know. I asked too, you know, some of the House members, and you all will hear that after Markos and I finish talking, whether they had any other legislative remedies up their sleeve, and they said they do. They didn't want to disclose them. So we'll just have to see what happens. But it's already 2022, Markos.
Yeah.
Markos, think about this. The clock is ticking already on some of these voter suppression laws in the 19 states where they have been resurrected. And so there's a clock on this. If this legislation doesn't really get through, it'll be in a timely fashion, it'll be too late to stop some of that which is going on in the other states.
This year is a wash. Like we're kind of screwed.
More MIP after this message.
The only thing that gives me a little bit of hope is that when there are voter restrictions, generally that cycle, there is a backlash with voters that are being restricted, right? People don't like to be told they can't vote. And we even saw that in Georgia in the runoff election just now where Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff won. People do not like to be restricted. And it's our problem is the second election. Once it becomes ingrained, once you get that initial burst of adrenaline and that fades, then that those restrictions really take root, right? So the only chance we have right now, other than some last minute conversion by Manchin that nobody's really expecting, of course, is that we win a net two seats in the Senate this November, and we rendered Manchin in cinema irrelevant.
Right.
And then once that happens, we can get DC statehood. I mean, the whole, things doesn't fully balance out, right? We can't balance out Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, all these small single member states. But you can start a little bit, DC gets us a little bit of the way there. Puerto Rico, if with a referendum, you want people to have their own self-determination, but with a referendum, Puerto Rico may end up being another state, right? So those things now become possibilities. This legislation becomes, a possibility, not just the one we have today, because this is the one that was written by Joe Manchin. This is Joe Manchin's bill that he himself is refusing to allow a vote on. Just the irony of the situation. And even though it was written by Joe Manchin, it's not terrible, but it's not the best piece of legislation we can have. We win those 2 net seats this year, then we don't need to use Joe Manchin's bill anymore. We can actually write the idealized version of a voter protection bill. So that's the game. That's the game. And of course, we've talked about it. Historically, the party in the White House loses seats in the midterm elections and congressional elections. We have some headwinds, but things aren't as horrible as they were in 2010 when Democrats got absolutely wiped out. And big part of the reason is that Donald Trump is Bigfooting his way in, doing his best to keep the Democratic base engaged, giving us candidates like Herschel Walker that are going to be much easier to beat than might otherwise be the case if you had Mitch McConnell in charge. Mitch McConnell, he knows what he's doing. It kind of almost offends me how little Mitch McConnell is appreciated by the Republican base. Like, he is the game. They have the Supreme Court because of Mitch McConnell, not Donald Trump, not Ron DeSantis, because of Mitch McConnell. And they hate him for whatever reason. He's been their most effective, loyal, and just downright evil foot soldier in the Republican conservative movement. So I don't understand why they don't appreciate him. But luckily, there is this. There's Trump, and then now you have this Trump-DeSantis feud that's starting to flare up, and you're going to see more and more people willing to stand up to Donald Trump. So you're going to be a little bit of a fracturing of that party. And my dream, Mark, is that Trump takes down DeSantis this year as a way to take out the sails of a 2024 presidential bid, because he's decided that DeSantis has screwed him. He's not loyal, blah, blah, blah. Right. There's an easy way to knock him out of the game, and it's just to help him, get him to lose this year's gubernatorial race. And if that happens, maybe he takes down Marco Rubio as well. Yeah. And then we have Florida's Florida, right? I mean, it's not a state where one party wins decisively. Yeah, it doesn't take much. Right. Now we got to get our people out. There's a lot of things, right? I mean, that need to happen. Joe Biden's numbers do need to creep back up, but it's not all lost, and that's the game. November's the game. You talked to Joe Trippi on the brief this week, and he gave you some optimism too, didn't he? Yeah. He had a 5-prong argument, and I don't know if I'll remember them all right off the top of my head, but one of them is Trump's big footing. I mean, Trump, instead of making 2022 a referendum on Joe Biden, it's becoming another 2020. It's becoming another battle of Trump versus Biden. That gives us a chance. Number 2, we got more votes than they did in 2020. 9 million more votes than Republicans did. We know who those people are. We have their information. We know where they live. We know how they voted. And so we have the ability to go back and build upon what was done in 2020. Doesn't mean that they'll want to come out, right? But at least we can message these people and work on them. So we have that kind of infrastructure built. Republicans did not gain seats via redistricting. Now, there's still some states left. New York's not done. Florida's not done. There's a court case in the Ohio Supreme Court just surprised everybody by throwing out the Republican gerrymander in Ohio. There's a lot of unknowns yet, but by all indications, we are probably ahead between 4 and 10 seats in redistricting. Now, what Republicans did is they already had a gerrymandered map because they did it in 2010. So what they did is there wasn't a lot of news room to pick up, particularly since in this last census, we talked about it, I don't know, half a year ago, rural areas have really emptied out. There is a dramatic decline in the white rural vote. So it sort of eliminated a lot of their ability to gerrymander aggressively. So what they did is they shored up their incumbents. So there's a lot fewer pickup opportunities for Democrats. But there are right now the official number is about 4 or 5 more more districts that Biden won than Trump won than in the prior years. And New York hasn't done the redistricting. We're expected to pick up a good 4 to 6 seats in New York with an aggressive gerrymander there. Good. So, and in Ohio, that might be an extra 3 or 4 from what Republicans had drawn. So there doesn't mean we're going to win the House. It just means that they didn't win the House without a single vote cast, which was worst case scenario. So you got that. You have the quality of the Republican candidates, not just the Herschel Walker, but everywhere there's primaries, it's the QAnon style Republicans that are winning. And not only are they going to be more beatable because they're QAnon style, they may win in Marjorie Taylor Greene's blood red district. That's a different story if you're talking about, Pennsylvania at large. And they're going to give us so much material to work with. Mark, you remember back in what was it, 2002 when we had Sharon Angle in Nevada who made an argument that that's not the way you said her name though. You she had 6 R's. You had a classic pronunciation. I was wondering, man. Okay, go ahead. These were the Tea Party crowd. They weren't even as far out as the Q people, right? And they would argue things like people don't need health government healthcare because they can trade chickens for healthcare. I mean, that was literally an argument that Sharon Angle made. There was that one in Maryland. I forgot her name, but she's the one that ran the ad saying, "I'm not a witch." And then you had, what's the guy in Missouri who talked about the rape comment, right? Where there were some
Yeah.
Oh, what was that? It was so
Was
bad.
that the one where he said women have a way of shutting down?
Yeah, there is that. Yes. I'm shutting that down. Todd Aiken.
Yeah.
More MIP after this message.
These candidates, we ended up limiting our losses, if not winning a couple of seats, by highlighting like just how far out there the Republican Party had become. This year, it's going to be so far beyond that, right? We're going to be talking like Jewish space lasers, type of crazy from the Republican Party.
Right.
You saw that was Lauren Boebert, right? Who was talking about Jewish space laser.
Yeah.
And
I looked like that because I'm still trying to figure out what a Jewish space laser specifically is.
So it's going to give us an opportunity. People may be upset at Joe Biden because we didn't get voting rights passed, and he does need to forgive student debt. But I think a lot of that is people are going to realize, oh my God, this is what the alternative is, and it's terrifying. And our democracy is literally on the line. I mean, this is not a debate over tax cuts for millionaires or even do we maintain a war in the Middle East, right? This is, do we have a democracy? Because Republicans and Donald Trump have made very clear that their goal is to take over the machinery of elections. Anybody that has a say in the election is a target because he's not pretending to win a majority of the vote. He didn't do it the first time. He certainly didn't do it the second time. I don't think he's even cares, right? In fact, he just uttered the same words that Joseph Stalin said. Like, what matters isn't who casts the vote. What matters is who counts the votes.
Right.
I mean, he's literally echoing one of history's worst murderous dictators. And that's what's at stake this November. And the thing is, the difference between a filibuster-proof Senate majority, and this is our last chance because the map gets really bad the next 2 cycles. Like, if we don't get it now, we're effed. The difference between, gaining 2 seats, at least net 2 seats this year, and losing the Senate is not even, it's so dramatically different. I mean, it's night and day. So it has to happen. Like, we don't have a choice. We have to win. Otherwise, it's going to get really dark and it's going to get really bleak. And our ability to move the country forward is going to, it's going to take a step back. It's going to make 2024 harder to hold on to the White House. We really won't have a chance to take over the Senate until 2026 at the earliest. Probably 2028, more realistically. I don't want that, Mark. We can't.
No.
We can't.
No, and as we've talked ad nauseum, I mean, everything you say, the good news is good news, but we can't. It's not like the weather. People aren't that good at predicting that nowadays either. We can't predict necessarily yet what morale will be this November or even in these primaries. Now, hopefully it's great. But I mean, we're at a very dangerous place because people are watching what's happening even in the Senate today, and they just don't understand. And I think that's, again, goes to, I'm not talking about the messaging problem that the Beltway media projects on Democrats. I'm talking about our own organic indigenous messaging issue, because we gave it to people very simply last year in January and November of 2020. Gonna do this, and we got a majority. But remember, it was just like you brought up, you put Max Baucus back on my brain. I'll blame you on that. I wasn't trying to think about Max Baucus anymore. or Sharon Angle for that matter. You brought up a lot of people today, but it's cool. remember how Obama comes in and we has a super majority. And it didn't take long for people to grasp, no, not really. That's not really what we have. This is it was a little bit more in the abstract. And people bought into 50-50 plus Kamala Harris makes it the +1. And I don't think anybody anticipated what, even if people wondered about Manchin, nobody thought Sinema would be the way she was because she rode in on her horse as a progressive.
Yeah.
So I think those are the little things that discourage and confuse and make people say to people like you and me, I'm already hearing it. Well, what difference does it make? They're going to, Ellie Mistel, folks, I share with the audience. I don't know if, I forgot to send you, Marcus, I don't know if you saw it, but he did a great thread about, Democrats having sort of a history of doing this. And then there's always some moderate to conservative Democrat that plays the role of scapegoat. He was reminding us how Joe Lieberman did the dance the Manchin is doing at one time, and Marcus did it. So, that's what we've got to overcome. And I think I've said this to you before too. The only advice I can offer, the only morale boost I can offer is to remind people, and Clyburn said it at the press conference today too, none of this stuff really does happen overnight. Even the end of slavery didn't happen overnight. Many people died and never saw freedom, but they kept fighting because they knew the next generation would pick it up. The most modern example, though, now this weekend, these folks about to tear up DC around Roe v. Wade. And folks, we might want to learn a lesson from that. It's been 49 years. But they never gave up. They never said, well, we put you in office and you didn't change about the next midterm, so we quit. They're dedicated and vigilant. Frederick Douglass said, price freedom is eternal vigilance. And so think about it. What they started 49 years ago, might actually happen because they never gave up. And so I don't know, folks, that we can really live with. I know everybody's upset and angry and frustrated. I get it. But I think we have to ask ourselves, look, if we do this, if we give up and give it all back to Trump, 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, well, maybe we shouldn't have given up either. Maybe stuff doesn't happen in a year or two.
I mean, we're still dealing with the consequences of 2010, where everybody stayed home because they were pissed off at Obama for not delivering everything he promised. No, he was dealing with Lieberman and Baucus and Conrad Burns and Bill and Ben Nelson's. So sure.
Okay, now you're doing it again. You didn't have to name all those names. I hadn't thought about them people. Bill Nelson, oh my God.
But I mean, if you want to complain, we probably had enough votes to get rid of the filibuster then, but since we had 60, and it doesn't matter. So it's been frustrating that, and to be actually fair, a lot of liberal interest groups actually fought to keep the filibuster in place because they just assumed we'd be in the minority the whole time, and that was the way to make sure that the Senate didn't pass more regressive legislation. Back when people pretended that America was a center-right nation. Remember that? America's a center-right nation. Like, nobody says that anymore. Like, that ship sailed. Nobody's pretending. Not even Republicans. Now nobody's pretending that stuff no more. But a lot of people had bought into that notion. And so a lot of liberal groups, they were perfectly happy to have the filibuster just to make sure that the Senate wouldn't pass anti-abortion legislation or anti-environment legislation. And so they also, as a movement, also shot ourselves in the feet. I mean, I was a radical, Mark, back in 2002 when I was advocating getting rid of the filibuster. Like, I would go places and people would yell at me. Like, did I know how irresponsible that was? So I take solace in the fact that at least not everybody agrees with me, because it was lonely, Mark, in those early days. It was lonely. I was like, what am I missing? This filibuster thing is crazy. Nobody believes it even exists. There's no accountability for the party in power because the minority can just obstruct and then say, look, they're a do-nothing Senate. Well, of course you're a do-nothing Senate, because all you got to do is say nope, and then it becomes a do-nothing Senate as long as you're in any kind of minority, any realistic. I mean, nobody's getting more than 60 votes in this day and age. So no, and then you know what? Frickin' McConnell will get rid of the filibuster as soon as it's expedient. And
That's right.
And then people be like, oh, the norms. Heavens, the norms. They'll all get the vapors. It's the norms.
Right. And cinema thinking that we have to protect it, or they're gonna, get rid of it when they come. They're gonna do it anyway.
They're gonna do it anyway, and I don't. Cinema. 2024 can't get here soon enough. No, anything else, we may be in the majority, we might be in the minority. I don't care. 2024 is the year we get rid of cinema.
Breaking news though, I'm up here. You walk these halls, you hear and you talk to people. So Lil Bird's up here telling me that he's not going to announce it yet because it's too early. But Ruben Gallego is going to take her down.
I mean, he can't announce now because he's got to win his re-election, right? It would be poor form to announce for something. Right. So he's not going to do that. But
and he just won. It's like a sweepstakes to see how many people are going to get. You're going to like.
No, Ruben's going to clear the field. I mean, maybe some other people. Ruben was going to run for Senate last year. And he stepped aside for Mark Kelly for the good of the party. Like, he was a consummate team player. I was actually, he asked me what he should do, and I was like, run. But no, he steps aside for the good of the party. So it's like, I think he's earned the right to step up and challenge. And I think he's going to raise more money than anybody. And there ain't enough PACs in the world. There ain't enough corporatists in the world for cinema to keep up.
Right. Let me give credit where credit is due. Ruben, folks, was a holdout for a little while, but Ruben has now himself even signed on to HR 40, which is a whole nother issue. As I've said, we're at 215 votes. So that doesn't count the speaker. So really we're 2 votes down, but Ruben is one of those votes, and that says a lot about him. And I just want to say that publicly. We appreciate that. We had to do some education. He was like, oh, yeah, I can do this. So that's a good thing. Well, folks, as I said, by the time you hear this, I will have already left here, I guess, unless, I sit in and go to jail some more. But as always, we thank you, Markos. Folks, stay tuned. Markos not going to leave, but we're going to leave you with some of the sounds from the Congressional Black Caucus here in the Senate. They walked over to the Senate side, held a press conference. You'll hear from Congresswoman Joyce Beatty and also Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. I posed a question or two, so you'll hear that when Markos and I leave. Markos, thank you as always, buddy.
Thank you so much. Have a great, safe weekend. Catch you next week.
All right, you too.
But maybe the question is more importantly to ask those 16 people who voted for it in recent times and are still here serving this nation. What happened? What happened? 16 Republicans on the record for voting for it. So maybe the question is, what is their plan? Let's talk to them when they come out and ask them who's controlling them and why they are not voting. So we will work with the White House, but more importantly, we have the American people on our side. We have civil rights leaders. We have majority and minority folks. You see, this isn't just a black issue. This is an American issue. Remember, white students sat down at those counters. Remember, white women have marched for us for some of our fundamental rights, whether that was health care or voting rights. So we're real clear on our strategy. Okay?
There are 2 senators standing in the way of changing Senate rules, Senators Manchin and Senator.
No, there's 52.
52 standing in the way.
52.
I'm curious, do you support primary challenges against Manchin and Senator?
I think today we support voting rights. Today we want to make sure that 52 senators are asked that question. Today is not about primary races. Today we came here to singly focus on voting rights and to only talk about voting rights. And that's what we're asking you to do. It's 52.
What do you say to activists and organizers and students who've been on hunger strikes and who engage in protests and continue to fight for voting rights? What do you say to young people who may be a little discouraged?
We say thank you, first of all.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for standing up, because this is also their future. Yesterday, we had the opportunity, many of us, the speaker, Terry Sewell, to listen to the leader of one of the largest activist groups. And he came and stood with the King family. He stood with us, and he thanked us. So I think it's a partnership. We win when we come together. Remember, it was a younger John Lewis and an older Martin. And they came together as they crossed that bridge. So we would like to say to them, thank you, keep fighting. Keep being out there, and we're with you.
We say to them that they can be tired. We're tired. They can be frustrated. We're frustrated. But they cannot give up. Think of this nation, what this nation would be if John Lewis had given up when he was bludgeoned on that bridge. Instead, he humbled back to Brown Chapel AME Church and organized a march 2 days later. This country has changed because of people's courage. And it bends towards justice, but it doesn't bend by itself. Activists help it bend.
Are there any other creative legislative remedies that can be tried in the House even after today?
Absolutely, and certainly we have talked in full disclosure about that. There are parts of the bill that's very important to us individually and collectively, whether that's pre-clearance, whether that is having the redistricting, whether that is the boxes for some of our seniors and others, the drop-off boxes, and the list goes on. So let me just say, we will come back again. Today is just our first step. We will come back with a clear plan that we bring back.
Final question on debate. Question for Mr. Clyburn. Mr. Clyburn, you're close to President Biden, obviously. You have his ear. The president gave a speech the other day on voting rights down in Atlanta. What more do you want to see from the President of the United States in pushing this across the nation?
Well, the president, if you recall, followed up that speech coming up here and meeting with the Senate caucus, Democratic caucus of the Senate, and he came out and met with the press. He made it very clear that he supported a workaround or a standing or changing the rules on the filibuster. And I want to see him keep pressing. He's going to meet the media today. Let me remind you that when the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was first written, they did not get it through the Congress. They couldn't get it. Dirksen, J. Everett Dirksen, one of my favorite of all times, finally worked with Lyndon Johnson, another one of my favorites of all times. And they took voting out in order to get it passed. They took housing out. They made it apply only to the private sector. We didn't get voting until a year later. We got housing 3 years later.
3 years later.
And in 1972, it applied to the public sector. So I want everybody to know, we want the Senate to act today in a favorable way, but if they don't, we ain't giving up.
Right.
And I'm too young to give out.
Thank you, Press. Thank you so very much.
Here with Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. How do you feel about what's taking place or not taking place in the Senate today?
Tyranny of the majority is not in action today. The tyranny of the minority is dumbing down the victory that the majority should have. So my view is that we have a fight to promote democracy. And democracy stands on the shoulders of the Constitution and the right for every American to vote. The question is, will the Senate have the courage, Republicans and Democrats, to be able to, in essence, stand for democracy over personal whims and the insignificance of the filibuster? It is insignificant. And it certainly doesn't counter the blood that has been shed by all of the foot soldiers, Dr. King, John, but many other unnamed persons who have laid their life down for the right to vote.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.